Hey, all right. Today we have Jamil Ford, co-founder of Mobilize Design and Architecture. He's especially been involved in designing projects in North Minneapolis, and he's currently involved in the Upper Harbor Terminal. Hey, Jamil, thanks for being here.
Thank you, JD. It's a pleasure to not only be here in the new year having this conversation, but it's an honor to have this opportunity to share my views and opinions.
Awesome. Yeah, appreciate it. First, tell me a bit about yourself. How long have you been in this business? How'd you get into this business?
So I've been involved in architecture for 20 plus years now. Originally, I was introduced to architecture over at North Community High School, where I was exploring 2 years of engineering as well as architecture or architectural drafting. I spent 2 years designing residential homes, and then I also spent 2 years exploring designing a solar boat and competing at a statewide competition level. And so that originally sort of piqued my interest, but I also had some really good connections back to a counselor that had a relationship with HGA architects, where I had an opportunity to uh, gain access to a summer internship. And then I also had a career fair where I met Mohammed Lawal, which is over at LSE Architects. And then I also had an individual, Paul Bachnight, that was also heavily involved in mentoring me uh, through North High and some of the architectural projects that came through there. And I also had some exposure through an architecture youth program that Mohammed Lawal led at the time as well. So that was my early initial access to architecture. Beyond that, I went to the University of Minnesota and had an opportunity to continue my internship, leading me into the shops department over at HGA, which then led me into healthcare architecture over there. Um, Spent some time there and eventually ended up over at Collaborative Design Group. Spent 5 years there doing large scale master campus master planning. Did a lot of adaptive reuse, a lot of multi-housing architecture, historic preservation, as well as a few other cool projects. And that sort of led me into 5 years of being over there, which eventually led me into running and operating Mobilize Design and Architecture.
Yeah. So how long has that been?
So that's been it's almost 24 years now.
Wow. Awesome. What would you say, you've had all this time, you're at it, you have things on the horizon. What are your goals as an architect?
My goals are to uh, continue to have direct impact in more of the eyes and ears of the urban core of not only North Minneapolis, but many communities above and beyond North Minneapolis. I would say it's my goal to uh, explore and meet not only the needs of one's own interest as a client, but also to have the impact on their neighbors and hopefully the blocks and the communities in which they not only touch, but have an opportunity to impact through creative design, creative opportunities to explore and go beyond the interest of traditional construction, as well as the impact on the construction industry as a whole.
Oh, sorry,
So,
I was muted there. That was my
oh,
bad. Um, what are some projects right now that you're especially proud of? What are some things you've completed recently, or some things you're currently working on?
some of the projects that we've recently completed was Sabathany Senior Housing in South Minneapolis. That was our first senior housing project, and One of the things that I would like to say about that project is that's probably one of the oldest African American organizations in Minneapolis or the Twin Cities in terms of community outreach and some of the impact that they've had, specifically in the Black community. And I think one of the positives coming out of that project was knowing that they've had project goals of providing senior housing in the community for decades, and to sort of see that not only come to life, but also work with individuals that have been around with that organization for well around, I would say, 50 years. And so to help some of the seniors actually see that come to fruition was a really good opportunity to see the pride, the joy, and what that sort of means to those residents. Another project that was very comparable in terms of impact was Estes Funeral Chapel. Once again, that project uh, came to me based on relationships, but I would say because of the transformation of the North Point Health and Wellness expansion, I had an opportunity to work with April Estes, the owner of Estes Funeral Chapel, and she told me directly that, hey, she wanted me to work directly with her in developing her future space for her facility. And I would say one very similar component to that was going above and beyond the standards of traditional architecture. I definitely wanted to make sure that this facility was modern, but also had the ability to be multifunctional. I didn't want it to look like a traditional uh, funeral chapel. I wanted to have, a distinct characteristic that really spoke to their branding and their future uses of that facility. And so, because we looked at it beyond the typical scopes of services, we had the ability to start thinking outside of the box and how they access and uh, produce their connections back to their users. And so we were doing things like virtual access to individuals that may be overseas or locked up or incarcerated. And so we wanted to create access. And by simple things like providing virtual connections, even with the pandemic hitting, we had the opportunity to be well ahead of the curve. In all of the rooms in that building, there was video access. So whether it was streaming online videos, um, images of, the individuals that may have been having services or memorials there at the facility. We had all of those access points in all of the rooms. And then even in the restrooms, we had audio for mothers that may be nursing and various things like that. And so we went outside of doing the work that we did from an architectural standpoint. But 3 months after construction started, one of the big things that stood out for me was the recognition of their overall revenue and what they were able to produce. Found out that within that first 3 months, they were able to capitalize on 1 year's revenue prior to construction starting, which was a testament that great design does matter. That facility went from being a Black funeral chapel to just a great funeral chapel. And I think it's something that everybody from the community can embrace. And that's what really stood out for me on a project like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. You were also talking about, so you're doing stuff with Upper Harbor Terminal. You were telling me a bit about the was it the color scheme and how it's related. It has a unique color scheme. Can you speak about that a little bit and where that comes from?
Yeah, so in the Upper Harbor Terminal, there was a few different characteristics that stood out for me in working on that project was, once again, I think because this is a BIPOC-led initiative in terms of the development efforts as well as minority participation in serving and meeting the needs of the African American community as well as others, I thought it was very important that we had a metaphor or themes that really stood out in terms of uh, the northern stars. When you begin to think about the Mississippi River, which is the American Nile, um, it really made me think about, what this culture not only means from a melting point here in the upper Midwest, but also the culture that has been embraced, whether it's music and the many different cultures that have evolved and have been housed here over the years. And so when you start thinking about the African American experience and even the history of traveling north, whether it's through the Great Migration or through the efforts of uh, access to being free from the South, uh, you know, um, looking to the Northern Star and what that really meant for African Americans, but also from the European or Norwegian or the North Stars hockey team, or the now we begin to look at our Vikings and that northern experience of connecting back to that celestial theme once again, and tying that back. And so as I started looking at the facade, I wanted it to not only have an experience both during the daytime, but also in the evening hours. And so in the evening hours, the Black facade would sort of dissipate and go away, yet the windows would sort of be large and open and sort of give that celestial look of, different stars opening up into that space in the Upper Harbor Terminal. And so during the daytime, we have metal ribs that are very tightly placed together at the base of the building, and they sort of uh, open up and spread towards the upper portions of the building as you get closer to the roof lines. And so I wanted that ribbing to cascade shadows onto the facade. And so you get these different shades of gray that also allows for a different perspective as you look at the building off of the river, or even from North Minneapolis, or from the south to the north of the structure itself.
Yeah, awesome. Having seen the renderings, I think it looks great. I think it looks really cool. Daytime, it'll be really really cool to see it at night too, and see what you're talking about. You've mostly done work in North Minneapolis, right? Can you speak to that? Why North Minneapolis?
Well, when we first started our firm, I had the opportunity to make a connection with a local church. It was Redeemer Lutheran Church on Glenwood Avenue, and it was a small project. It was a bicycle shop, but once again, even small in scale, it had a big community connection because there was no bike shops in North Minneapolis at the time. And, the whole ideal around Venture North Bike Shop, working with some of the collaborators and partners on that project, even just coming up with that name was very important. But to see the pride and joy, once again, with the community getting involved, providing a local amenity such as bicycling and access to bicycling, and not only looking at it from a for-profit side of things, but also from the nonprofit side. So working with kids, youth, families to introduce them to bicycling was very important to me. And so going beyond the bricks and mortar of just a building was very important. But During that time, Devin George, he had the opportunity to retire from the NBA, and he had spent about 11 years in the league. Was a childhood friend of mine, and when he returned, he said, "Jamil, I want to look beyond just a typical toy turkey drive that most athletes come back to their communities and provide." And so, one of the big things that we explored was property that his father owned on Penn and Golden Valley Road, and it was directly adjacent to some city-owned parcels. And one of the big things that I said was, what could the highest and best use of this parcel be, and what are the needs of a community? And we began to think about housing and a shortage of food in regards to more of a food desert. Very similar to housing, we see that there's a great need for affordable housing. And so we began to try to explore and see what the possibilities were there. And so that was sort of the kickoff of me getting heavily involved in multi-housing apartments. And so with that project, I think at the time, I think the Pope was traveling to America, and we were trending number 2 right behind the Pope coming to America. And I think that was in 2017. But that too was a very challenging yet cool project to work once again with the community and showing them something different from what they had saw. There was initially a lot of naysayers because of the housing stock that exists just west of that property. And so we had to literally work with residents in reassuring and building up the relationships to show and prove, to let them know that, hey, we're trying to provide good quality housing that goes beyond what's been demonstrated on this quarter of the past.
Yeah. So you're talking about the possibilities in North Minneapolis. I know you've also spoken to KMOJ about revitalization efforts in the area. What opportunities do you still see in North Minneapolis, and how do you see kind of various stakeholders, investors, developers jumping on those opportunities?
So I think there's a lot of different advantages, specifically in North Minneapolis. When you start talking about regional rail coming through the community, I know for every $1 million that's invested, there's a 16-fold return. And, that's, roughly $32 million that would be, reinvested in this community along that corridor. And, everybody talks about gentrification and the scariness of displacing individuals and people. And I would just say that gentrification is not always bad when it could be people of color that are providing and have the access into the community, which is needed from income and revenue standpoint for our community. I look forward to a day when we can look at West Broadway as a commercial corridor that's surrounded by for-profit businesses, preferably owned and operated by BIPOC businesses. And once again, whenever we can have space and opportunities for the Kevin Garnett's attorneys, doctors, and other professionals to live and reside in our community, I think that's a great access point for people that may not necessarily have access to better incomes, and just the exposure point in seeing opportunities for them to build those relationships, to begin to sort of see and understand that, hey, even if I don't have the necessary income levels of this other individuals, I have the possibilities of becoming or increasing their exposure points through improving their skill levels, getting education, and going above and beyond that as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Jamil, I don't think I really have any other questions. Was there anything you wanted to add that I didn't ask about?
I would just say that in the work that I've been providing, specifically around multi-housing, one of my big challenges back to individuals like Devin George and other developers is, how do we go above and beyond the status quo of affordable housing? How do we begin to look at it as attainable housing? And more so, how do we begin to create access points for those individuals that may have lower income levels to increase and improve those opportunities? And so, one of the big things that I would like to look forward to through projects like the Upper Harbor Terminal, Project 6A, is to begin looking at luxury living at an affordable price, and pushing the pendulum forward to providing better jobs in our community through a future modular housing facility where individuals can work year round in T-shirts and eliminate a lot of the barriers that currently exist in the construction field. And so we're going to continue to push forward and hard on creating access points, both through training as well as increasing one's ability to build their skill level, but also striving and pushing our youth for better educations as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Sounds great. Thank you so much for taking the time.
No, thank you. This has been a great honor. And once again, JD, thank you for your time.
Of course. Take care. See ya.
Thank you.